That's the beauty of entrepreneurship. Like, you don't need to necessarily be the first at everything to be successful. See college as like a stepping stone, but it's not the final destination. It's like the job you really want to work in.
Right.
The type of lifestyle that you have is the final destination.
Yeah. And my question for you would be, what's the most courageous decision you think you've done in your life as of today?
Okay. Wow, that's a great question.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chasing Lightning podcast, where I help you live slow, move fast, and start things to help you do it sustainably. This is the new studio. So yeah, if you're watching this on video, you might notice that this is not my room. Now we are in one of the classrooms in American University, and my roommate and I, we talked about like finding the right space for this podcast for the longest time. We spent like hours talking about where are we going to do it, what space is going to have the right acoustics, is going to look cool, is going to just embody the spirit of what I'm doing. And we were stuck for a while, but we found out this one classroom that is actually kind of like shaped like a circle. And if you guys look at my logo, it's literally a circle. So I think it's perfect. So I recommend you go on YouTube and you check out how it looks. But today we have our first ever guest interview. I had a vision on what this platform was going to look like back when I was doing my newsletter, that I would invite people along for this journey. And the fact that we're doing it, that we're bringing that to life is extremely meaningful. And I don't think I could have chosen a better first guest than to have probably my closest friend, who is a startup co-founder. He's from the San Francisco Bay Area, and he is running a startup with two other co-founders that has actually generated $100,000 in revenue within its first year. It's an incredible story, and he's also an incredible person just to learn from on what it's like to go through that experience and to go through that process of starting something super big, for it to scale at the same time, and to also find out what are the tensions between living slow and moving fast. And I think that this conversation is going to teach you so much, especially if you want to start like a startup and maybe you're even in college. This conversation is gold. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our first guest, Mridul Prasad.
Mridul, thank you for being on the podcast, man.
Thank you for inviting me, dude.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Of course. You know what's interesting is while I was coming here, right? So we were supposed to meet in this room, and I come in and it's locked, and it's always open. So what happens is I kind of like am stuck. I have all my equipment with me, and I see this lady walk by. I don't know who she was, and at first like she just went by me, and she came back. I was like, I gotta ask someone like how to get into this room. And so I asked her, like, hey, can you help me out? Because I don't know what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to get into this room, and it's normally open. And so she's like, oh, yeah, follow me. I think I know somebody. And then she takes me into a room of like 30 people. Where they all like on their computers just like typing something. And then they all look up at me, and I'm like, hey. and then she's like, hey, guys, does anyone know how this guy can get into this classroom? And then when someone said, like, hey, just go to the third floor. And then I went up there, and shout out to Taylor for helping me out there. And then I met some two people who were like just like chilling in an office, and then they saw me like, oh, what do you need? And it's like, can you open them the door? And it's like, sure. So both of them came down here. We talked about the podcast. We talked about like the interface. They asked me questions like, what microphones are you using? What's your interface? SOC stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, man, I'm really happy we're in this room. I think it should be like the normal setup for future podcasts, and I'm super glad to have you on. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind? First things first. I'm just really excited to be here. I know you've been talking about this.
Yeah.
Just like from like a friendship perspective, I've always been like excited to see you whenever you take on like a new endeavor. Yeah. And I think that's also why we've gotten so close over college, is because we share that one common trait, which is just being able to start things and take initiative.
Wow.
I remember like, even though, for example, the real estate investment trust fund that you're a part of, as a freshman, it could have been super intimidating being in an environment where it's mostly juniors that are complete like finance nerds. Yeah. They read the stock market 24/7, and you still have the courage to do that. Now you have this podcast. So if there's anything on my mind, it's just being able to like appreciate the initiative you take. And seeing how this podcast goes from here. When I first walked into this room, I was like, dude, this setup is impressive. It's insane.
Thank you, bro.
Especially for your first episode. This is your first time, so I just want to give you major props for being able to start this up.
My man is flattering me too much. For context, Mridul and I, we met first year. You're my neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
What about you share with the audience? Like, how did we
Yeah.
first meet? What was that? What was that like?
When we first met, I remember you were like the social butterfly. You were talking to everyone in the common lounge, and I was over there sleep deprived. My eyes were red.
I remember like the first time I saw you, like you were eating like this Subway wrap, you know? You were on that Subway,
Yeah.
and then you were like, I don't know. I remember you were just like you're right. You were really tired. Your eyes are pretty red, so I thought you were on something at first, but you weren't. I know you weren't.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh wow, this guy, who is he? And eventually, you know, we just got to know each other more naturally,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like, just by hanging out by the dorms,
Mm-hmm.
the common area. But I remember this was one moment, right? It was right before an interview that I had with like Gallup.
Yeah,
And
I remember.
I remember I was like in like I think it was in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And I was just like getting ready, and I just you were right next to me, right? And I just started talking it up about the event.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey man, I got a question. Like, how do I get ready for this? I need your input on this.
Yeah.
And you started dropping bars.
Some bars.
Some bars.
Which bars did you remember?
I think at that time you were reading like Dale Carnegie's like how to influence people, how to win them over, and how to get friends, right?
Yeah.
And so you were like, hey, you should probably first go in with like this desire to explore like who the person is, like essentially embrace the interest of the other person. And I was like, okay. I remember there was a tactical piece of advice though that you gave me about like how to integrate my almost like who I am, my personal brand, with the context of the event. I don't recall specifically how like what you said in that moment, but I said, okay, I'll try it. And I did. And it worked out really well because later on I reached out to the guy and he's like, hey, you're like the most memorable person of the entire event. And there was these grad students. I don't know what these bots were doing. But I was like a freshman getting to know this guy. He's like, hey, you should definitely like reach out to me in the future because I have my own platform. I'd be more than happy to help you with like your newsletter because I was doing that at the time. And I think that's what hit it off.
Yeah. I remember I was doing my skincare. I was rushing in the morning. I was like getting ready, dude. That's when I first like started like an actual like morning routine because I didn't really take care of myself like that like in high school.
For real.
I was always the kid that would like show up to class like pretty late in my pajamas. So I tried to take care of myself a little more seriously in college. Yeah. And I remember like right before I head out from the bathroom, I'd bump into you. And then we'd just literally be yapping for 30, 40 minutes about like anything that we were thinking about. And I think each interaction, it just kept getting better and better, which is how I know that there was something special about our friendship because it's very rare to be able to like just be able to talk to someone in everyday situations, have the time feel like it just flies by. And there's always something memorable at the end of every interaction.
Yeah. I mean, you contribute a lot about that. I mean, I can be pretty boring at times.
Nah, there hasn't been a single time where I was just like, man, like, I feel like I just wasted my time here, or this person drained me of my energy. I'll be honest, I've never felt that with you.
Wow.
And I think a lot of people could relate too. Like, I recall, like, you're able to, like, literally just spark conversations with everyone, people at Subway, even like a TDR or even the workers at True Burger, Panera Bread. You just seem to be able to get along with everyone, which I think
they're amazing people.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I think a reason why that happens is because one of the things I learned pretty early on is that when you're meeting because you know, especially at AU, we see a lot of people just like walk by us every day, right? And I think I learned it over high school that if there's one thing I should get really good at is to learn and to really embrace this mindset that every person that's passing by your life is also on a journey towards something really special. And if you get a chance to cross paths with that person, which if we're speaking in terms of chances and probabilities, think about the probabilities of you even crossing the person you're next to at this moment. It's astronomical. And I thought, okay, that's fascinating. And what fascinates me even more is that person is right next to me.
Wow. I'm flattered.
And so, actually, now you brought up high school, I want to actually know. This is a great segue. You said that in high school you didn't put in that much intention to taking care of yourself, right? How did high school set the foundation for what you're doing in your startup today, and for the performer that you are, high performer that you are in business, academics, and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So that's a really grounded question, but I'd have to break it up into multiple components. So I'd say for the first part, my high school life and college life have been very different. Especially, I would say there's two major phases in high school. There was me as an underclassman through 9th and 10th grade. And by the end of my senior year, like I'd say the second semester, I feel personally that I was turning into a very different person, because 9th and 10th grade, I was a complete goon. I was a straight clown. Yeah, I was very outgoing. I like to get to know people really well. I like to crack jokes all the time. Yeah, and it had its ups and downs, but ultimately, I was growing up in a very hyper competitive environment in a high school in the Bay Area. There's a lot of people that already have their own startups. They have their own nonprofits. They're already getting internships at the age of 15 or 16. And I was like, bro, relax, bro. I'm just trying to enjoy my life.
And the nonprofits for college.
Yeah, exactly. So I almost intentionally limited my capability, kind of as a self-defense mechanism, because I didn't want to be part of that crowd. I just wanted to do what I liked. I wanted to be around people that I admired and enjoyed spending time with. And that's how I spent a lot of my time, freshman, sophomore year. I was kind of a goofball. I took things very lightheartedly. And then, I'd say during COVID, junior year was remote learning. And I also got a high school counselor. This is also a really interesting segue into how I came up with the idea for my startup. Is I feel like a lot of people in a similar environment as me, their parents are very concerned for them. They want them to go to the best school possible. So I understand where they come from.
Yeah.
But after that, they get a counselor. They invest thousands of dollars, but they end up giving the same exact advice they could give to any other kid. And it's very hard for them to understand what your experiences are like if they haven't done it themselves. So junior year, I remember they were literally on the phone call with me. They were just like, yo, even if you get a couple B's, based on your school, I know how competitive it is. Things are not going to be looking good for you if you don't get your act together. And then my mom started getting really strict about me taking my grades more seriously. I was under the mentality oh, if I get a couple B's here and there, it's fine. Right? But then junior year was probably my turning point where I took things a lot more seriously. Now I wanted to compensate for all of the goofball events I did throughout freshman and sophomore year. But I realized that people have already made a perfect path starting freshman year. So I was already behind the 8 ball. So I'd say heading into college, one of the main things that influenced me in my high school experience was the fact that I wasn't starting on the right foundation early on. So I want to do whatever it takes to make sure that I take everything as seriously as I can while also enjoying it.
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot going on there. You found out the problem because your guidance counselor, shout out to your guidance counselor, bro. I hear that you were this environment you were in had a very important impact in your development. And I'm wondering, right, how many of those people, because one of the things that we talk about chasing lightning is, live slow, you move fast, and you start things. Character and health, I think, are what makes up living slow and moving fast. I think you're very familiar with that already. And you're coming from a culture where one of the slogans is literally move fast and break things. But what happens is when you do that, a lot of people may not realize it, that they're moving really fast, but they're just broken in general.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did you, did you feel like that environment at all helped you find yourself as well? Or how was how was that environment really shaping you in your journey of chasing lightning? Was there anyone who was even chasing lightning to begin with?
Yeah. If the question is if I've seen anyone that was trying to move fast, that's almost everyone that I met at my high school.
Yeah.
A lot of people were very driven. They wanted to take a lot of initiative.
Right.
And it had a lot of benefits because you were surrounded with a group of peers that were very ambitious. They at least had an idea of what they wanted to do with their career from a very young age, even if it's changed over time. And being surrounded in that environment kind of challenges you to like look inward and try to see what aspects of my life can I do to assimilate with them, because human beings are, just from like a nature perspective, they're like very good at assimilating with their environment. And if you're around people that are very driven and are trying to take initiative with a lot of things, regardless of why they're motivated to do it, you're naturally going to want to do that yourself. But when I was younger, it encouraged me to run the opposite way, because I also saw that people internally did not feel good. And like you said, when you try to chase things too quickly, you end up getting broken, because a lot of people were just doing it for their college apps, for example. And I understand the need to set yourself up for success. But if you lack a deeper motivation behind why you do the things that you do, it's very easy to get burnt out or feel like you're just wasting your time for like this one outcome. And obviously I see college as like a stepping stone, but it's not the final destination. It's like the job you really want to work in.
Right.
The type of lifestyle that you have is the final destination, right? So I would say the benefit it gave to me was being able to stay authentic to myself, because I feel like you won't know what that means until you're tested, right? And that entire environment for me in high school was really a test to see whether I was going to do things for the sake of chasing one specific outcome, or whether I was going to do it to like enjoy my journey, if you get what I'm saying. That's what I was saying. That's why I really, really enjoyed debate. And I really liked the people I was around. It was one of the most enjoyable experiences, going to travel tournaments, seeing people from all over the country. That's probably my favorite part. I still talk to a lot of these people to this day. And it's funny because in middle school, I didn't want to do it. My parents dragged me into a debate camp. But I really ended up enjoying it.
So I see this story. I see this journey unfolding. In high school, you're around about a bunch of people who are chasing a lot of things that you would see from the outside were chasing lightning. They were really starting a lot of things, but they might not have had the right motives. And you decided to use the first few years of high school to defend yourself from that, and then eventually to pivot and to eventually discover what you're doing at Collegiate and discover the beauty of debating, right? Which, by the way, you're one of the best communicators I know, so that's something we really value. So now you see like this why almost unravel out of an environment where all these whys, like the whys of these people, are kind of distorted. And I think it's really beautiful, right? Where you see something that pure and something that aligned with who you are unfold. How did that turn into Collegiate? How did this materialize?
Yeah, so one of the core values at Collegiate, whether we're having people work for a company or whether it's a client that we're servicing, it all comes down to long-term alignment. This is where we like to distinguish ourselves from a lot of people in the educational consulting space, because it is really easy to orient your entire business structure and marketing over this idea that here is a very prestigious outcome we can get you into, and you can pay tens of thousands of dollars to get here. We understood that environment inside out, and we pledged to help students in a completely opposing mentality, where it's like, we'll get you into an environment that's best suited for your long-term interests. That's easier said than done. And the vision for forming Collegiate was me and my two other co-founders, Jesse and Yishan. We started Collegiate as a way of helping students maximize their early career development while making sure we got an understanding for what they want to do with their lives. And it's very hard to find that out I'm still trying to figure that out in my own life too. My interests are constantly changing, but at least being able to understand how to explore that, what resources are available to you, and how to optimize your personal brand. What activities should you be doing? Even if you have an existing career path you want to go to, or if you want to change, or if you have no idea where to start, how do you approach that entire process? And how do you set it up so you're successful, not just to get one outcome, but so you've built a personal brand and you have the skills to do it if you had to start from zero?
Wow. So I know you guys have a really unique approach, and I think a lot of it is centered on personal branding.
Yeah.
Right? I'm wondering, like, how did you, was it like a conversation that you guys had one day where you guys like, "Hey guys, there's like a major gap here." Like all these people are running around thinking about all these different parts of the process, but they're missing the signature, like the signature centerpiece, which is their personal brand. How did that epiphany arrive?
Yeah, I mean, there was multiple. There wasn't like a single defining moment. It happened over time. So we started getting hints and realizations of this when people that had counselors at our school were asking us for help, and they told us after we were editing their applications, and we were able to give them a lot more thorough insight. For example, a lot of students do speech and debate, and I think it's a wonderful activity. But if you write on your Common App that you did it because it taught you how to critically think, research, and gave you public speaking skills, you're going to sound like a bot. And a counselor might tell you, yeah, that's cliche, but what kind of solution can they offer to you, especially if they haven't done that activity themselves? I'll also tell you what the idea for my essay was. I talked about debate, but I did it through the context of listening. And when I went through a lot of tournaments, I realized that a lot of the times people think of debate as an activity where you're trying to take complete authority and ownership of your own arguments and try to bully somebody else. But I learned that the most successful communicators in that space had the ability to observe very specific types of arguments and evidence, try to find some common ground. And what I found to be the most powerful piece of advice that I received when I was getting debate coaching and also teaching other students was the best debaters are the people that can find what you agree upon the most. So you spend the most amount of time settling what you actually disagree about. Because it turns out in a lot of debates, there's just one or two fundamental ideas that you disagree with. And I kind of framed that essay around that central idea, but I did it in the context of having a conversation with my mom. Wow. And it was an interesting take. And the reason why I bring up that example is because if there was a kid that comes and approaches you for help, and you've done this activity, you know it inside out, your ability to help them and give them an actual solution is going to be so much higher than someone who hasn't applied to college in 20, 30 years. So that's why we found over time that this is also an indicator if anyone watching this thinks they have a business idea. One of the clearest indicators is if you notice people in your personal life ask you for advice on a specific subject. So if you notice that someone like keeps approaching you for like, yo, your hair looks really good. Like, what kind of product do you put? Maybe you're really into like finding like a signature hairstyle. You know all these products inside out. You could be a content creator and making content for like men's hairstyles. So the epiphany for me was the fact that there's so many people reaching out for this specific issue they're facing. I was like, shouldn't your counselor be able to solve that? And then
trying to rob them for their jobs.
Yeah, exactly. And then I asked a question fundamentally in my mind. Is this just that they have a bad counselor, or is this like a systematic issue? Is this something structurally wrong with the field of educational consulting, that there isn't enough peer-to-peer mentorship? And we're obviously not the first peer-to-peer firm to ever exist, but I mean, that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. Like, you don't need to necessarily be the first at everything to be successful. It's about whether or not the people that go through your service have a good experience, and ultimately you'll build a community. And if you really do them right, they will refer you down the line.
Wow.
So
Dude, that's amazing. Wow, that's amazing. I remember in my essay, I don't remember, I think the main concept was on the concept of connection, right? And I remember opening it with like, hey, the most profound conversations I've ever had were like the SAT, like waiting room. The brother would just be like, I would just talk to people like while I was waiting to go into my SAT room, and some of these people would have some amazing stories on like what they're trying to do in life. Kind of what you're trying to say, like they're driven, they're trying to get stuff done, to get into their best colleges, and I'd be like fascinated by it. And so I found a way to tie that into like how I was able to form connections and frame that as like one of the main like values of my life, and how that unfolded to one of my biggest pain points when going through high school, feeling like a disconnect and feeling like I couldn't belong in some places. So one thing I do want to talk about though is you're right out of college, you're a sophomore, and you are also working with an amazing team of co-founders. And the idea was planted there in high school, and you guys go into college, and of course we meet, and you're building this out. So tell me about that experience, because you're building out this startup in college. Like, what's that like?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really difficult. If you ever start a business, I'd say the number one thing is do it with somebody you can really trust. I'd highly recommend any initiative you start, like a startup, any company, at least have one co-founder with you. I'd actually recommend a team of 3 at least.
Wow,
because
that's very interesting.
Yeah,
usually I mean, like 2, but like 3.
I'd highly recommend a team of 3, because let's say me and you are co-founders for another company that we start, and we have a disagreement. Usually the third guy is the person that can like tip the scale in someone's favor.
Interesting.
And sometimes you'll reach a standstill in a lot of different decisions you need to make. And there's usually another person that could make it so like the decision-making process is clear.
Right.
And in order to respect that dynamic, you really have to trust these people. And the benefit of me being co-founders with Jesse and Ishan is we've literally been like childhood friends. Amazing. Well, with Ishan, I've known him since middle school, but we weren't like close friends until like our senior year. With Jesse, he was my next door neighbor, so I got really lucky. But yeah, first recommendation is, with my experience running a startup in college, it's really helpful to have at least a team of 2 other co-founders on your side.
Interesting.
Because if you only have you and somebody else, it's going to be very hard to make decisions quickly, because you're eventually going to reach a standstill. Number 2 is, I'll be upfront, during the semester and midterms, most of the work will feel like you're just treading water, and you're making sure the ship is still sailing, and you're just trying to maintain all of the core business operations. But it's very hard to build out a new project while like you're studying for your exams. Right. I would say most of our project building, once we do things that really move the needle, happen over winter break, spring break, summer break. And it's amazing. Like, I feel so happy after every vacation we have, because we're just able to get so much more done.
Yeah. You mind if I just jump in here and ask just a quick follow-up? Because one thing that's also important to know is that you guys are a remote team. And you guys aren't all a part of American University. That would be pretty interesting if Jesse and Ishan were here.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that? Like, how do you guys do this all while remote on top of all that?
Yeah. I could answer that in 2 words. Actually, 1 word, which is just a calendar. And we need to follow that like a religion. Like, you need to follow that super carefully, and we need to approach it with a lot of discipline. So especially that we're running these operations remotely, we need to ensure that people show up to meetings on time. We have like a proper procedure for approaching every meeting with an agenda in Notion. Notion is a great service, by the way. We're not promoting this by any means, but we've used their free service for like a really long time. We're using their education plan right now. And we use all of their templates. We already have a plan before each meeting. You should not be freeballing any meeting, by the way, if you're running any type of company. And we made that mistake personally ourselves. when we were like first starting out. And I would say the number one thing is have a calendar, have an agenda prepared, and make sure you meet at least on a weekly basis. Because if you don't, it's very easy to like make excuses or say like, oh, like it's fine if we miss these deadlines.
Yeah.
We'll just like move it to like the next week on the Notion calendar.
Yeah.
So I'd say the number one thing is just having a calendar, scheduling a common time, and getting an idea of everyone else's schedule, and being consistent with that. Make sure you guys meet at least once a week.
Dude, did you hear about the Notion calendar that just came out?
Yeah, they bought out Cron, right?
I know, man. I know Jesse. Not Jesse. I think it is Jesse who uses Cron, right?
Yeah.
Dude,
Sean.
Andy Sean, yeah. That's so interesting. I love it. I think this is such amazing tactical advice for anyone who wants to start. Like anyone who's in college right now and wants to start something, especially a startup, this is gold. So thank you so much for sharing this. So now that you have this amazing team, you have these 2 co-founders, and you have this service. I'm wondering, like, what do you guys envision for the future of this to look like? Because you're in college right now. Have you guys thought about like what's going to look like after college at all?
Yeah, definitely. So both Ishan and Jesse are computer science majors. Yeah. They had the whole Silicon Valley mindset. They wanted to take the route of integrating some type of tech into our consulting startup. Yeah. They were thinking about like long term, like let's get some VC funding. That could definitely be a possibility sometime in the future. But I would say our 3-4 year plan is to scale our consulting as much as possible, gain as much results as we can, boost our ethos, boost our marketing. And I have plans to go to law school and study a combined JD MBA program. And Jesse and Ishan will probably take like a gap year. These things are not like set in stone, by the way, but we've definitely had these conversations. And we definitely see Collegiate as something that will still last us for a very long time. The lifespan does not just end once we graduate. So let's say I get into law school, maybe Jesse takes a master's program, or both of them just take a gap year and they just work on Collegiate. And maybe in a couple years we have our own jobs. I'm working at a law firm. Jesse like works for Fang or whatever tech company he does. Same with Ishan, right? We see Collegiate as something that we've scaled and we've gotten all the operations down. So all we have to do is like maybe every Saturday or Sunday, we'll just hop on a call and we'll just handle any management related issues. But by that time, we'll have a team of a bunch of counselors, a bunch of editors, a bunch of project managers. And our job is to just primarily make sure like the ship is still sailing smoothly. So I don't think it's something that we have to abandon once we graduate. But that means we have to work very aggressively after every vacation or during every vacation, because it's hard to build projects, build systems while we're in school.
Yeah, how did that even happen? Like you guys have to be extremely intentional during the semester. Like, because when crap hits the ceiling, y'all can't take on that many things. Y'all get kind of clamped. So it's like you have to be so intentional with how you structure your workload. And there has to be a certain rhythm to it. How do you guys even create that? Is that something you learn like over time through like, you learn like, okay, that didn't work, and you just eventually get into it? How do you set that up?
Yeah, so you're actually right on the money. It's just an iterative process. And that's what's that experience is like running any type of startup. Is the best way to learn is by like failing really fast. It's a lot of cliche advice, but it's super true. And a lot of the times it's easy to feel disappointed when you try a new system and it just completely backfires on you. Because you're like, oh, I got this Notion set up. I have my Google Calendar set up. I have Cron. I have all these integrations with me. I set up all these fancy databases. I have all these toggle views. My days are going to be looking so productive. And then you sit in front of a task and you just don't want to do it. And then you're like, wow, I just wasted all my time. And I think the bigger question is us just trying to figure out why we want to do something. So why are we doing a task? And Ishan's been geeking up on all the management books he can get his hands on. And one of the things he was learning about was OKRs.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've heard about objectives and key results, but when Google was like a startup, it was in like a smaller phase. They attributed most of their success just to having the OKR system. So essentially what it means is the O stands for an objective. Think of it as like a signpost. So we'll give an analogy with fitness. Let's say you want to get into better shape. That's your objective. It's very broad and big picture. And then your key results are indications that you're getting into better shape.
Yeah.
So are you sleeping 8 hours a day? Are you getting enough protein? Are you lifting like 5-6 times a week? Whatever your workout split is, right? So we started applying that into our own business like pretty recently, like over winter break. And now when we see our tasks, we're like, okay, us completing this will actually take us somewhere. So I think intentionality and purpose matter a lot. Each time I do a task, I'll understand why it needs to be done. And it will help me feel more motivated to do it. And another benefit is just breaking it down into smaller tasks, because that's the benefit of breaking things into key results. And then you assign a task based on each key result.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So is this, I think that this is something that you also now have learned to do like in your personal life too, right? Like you do now like the business side of this, but this also has a very practical application in daily living, right? Yeah. One of the things I also like found very interesting based on what you said is this idea of productivity, right? Because you said when you have the best systems in place, and you step into a task, sometimes you just don't want to even do it, right? It doesn't matter how good your systems are. Sometimes they're just there is like a certain intrinsic motivation that needs to accompany it, and that's where the OKRs come in. But I'm interested, how has your relationship with productivity evolved at all? Or how has it evolved over the past couple of years in your startup and being in college?
That's a really great question. So I'll say this goes back to the earlier question you asked me about how high school affected my work ethic in college. I became a lot more driven for the wrong reasons because I wanted to compensate for who I wasn't able to be when I was like younger. When I was a freshman or sophomore, I didn't take my life too seriously. And now each time I was doing something, it was almost to like prove something to myself, where it's like, okay, this is how you can prove that like you're actually like worth accomplishing something. So based on this like negative emotion, I would try to like over prepare for every exam, or else I would have thought, oh, I'm just a failure, or like I'm never going to achieve anything like meaningful in my life. So I had a negative relationship. And the word I remember you had this exercise you did for yourself. We had a meeting before where you like said a word of the year. And for me, it was forgiveness, because it was like forgiveness for myself, actually, because I really despised who I was in high school because I just didn't take things seriously. And now that I'm in college and I'm responsible for the rest of my life, that's when it really hit me when I was a freshman. I was like, I really need to get my stuff together. That's when I had a more negative relationship with getting my work done. I was still like achieving my goals, but I still felt miserable throughout the entire process. So like now moving into this year, my main objective is just to do things, but find like a more like an intrinsically more positive reason for why I need to do something, right? Because there's really two ways to motivate yourself to do something. You could either scare yourself into doing it, which fear is a very effective emotion. I used to watch Kobe Bryant all the time, and for him, that was a big motivating factor. I used to listen to all his podcasts when I was younger, and there was other players that had a lot more joyful relationship with what they did. And you have a choice. You'll figure out what works best for you. But I feel like long term, I just needed to find a better reason for doing something. My startup, I'm just thinking about how much happier would I feel about myself if I challenged myself to do something I'm not learning in school. Because right now, like Jesse's our main technical guy who's spearheading our AI project. But I'm also getting to learn prompt engineering. And he's also walking me through the process of how he's creating this agent, because I also designed the rhetorical frameworks that we're trying to implement. So that is something I tell myself in my mind. Just imagine how much better I'd feel about myself if I challenged myself to do this, as opposed to me telling myself, oh, well, if you're not able to achieve this, you're just not a smart person, or you're not cut out for this. Or like it triggers some type of imposter syndrome where I'm really not cut out to be a founder.
Wow. Dude, I love that word. I don't think I've heard your word of the year. I think it's the first time I actually heard it. That's so beautiful. I'm also going to pull a story that I literally went through like today. So last night, I was getting everything ready for this podcast, right? Making sure that sound was in check, video was in check, because I bought everything for my podcast like this week. And I remember my roommate Ian and I, we spent like an hour discussing. Like, we came up with this room, which I'm so glad we're doing it here. It's beautiful. And I wanted to teach him like how to set up like the podcast in terms of audio, right? So it was like about close to midnight at that time, because we were done with all work and I could focus finally on just setting up the podcast. And so we were just chilling out. Like he was just like reading his book. And I'm like, hey Ian, so this is what you put into the interface and this is what you put into the laptop, like as if he's gonna like eventually do it himself, which I don't think he is. and so I was like, okay man, and once you click this button, everything should be just fine. And I clicked like the button where I could record and I selected the inputs, and then it turns out that none of the inputs were like receiving any feedback. Like the audio wasn't coming in. And my man Ian was like, so is it working? And I was like, no. So what ended up happening was I was like, I'm going to figure this out, because I mean, I have my interview with you today. Yeah. So I was like, hey bro, you got to go to bed, that's fine, but I'm going to be up until I get this figured out. Yeah. I didn't go to bed until 4.
4 a.m.
It wasn't 2. 2 was when I figured out okay, like this might not be fixable. But then I was like, I'm gonna see if I can like find people that have gone through the exact same problem I had. And I spent hours upon hours reading Reddit posts and all these different resources. And I ended up just asking communities like, what's going on? And at that moment, I knew, like, I had an awareness, like, this is obviously going to affect my circadian rhythm.
Gotta start tweaking.
And I was already like, because before I go to bed, I like to do like a routine, a ritual where I have like my notepad where I have like the time block and my priorities. And I'm like, I know when I wake up this morning, it's going to be way later than what I normally do. And if I hinged my worth on the productivity I achieve at a certain time, or on the time of day that I wake up, right, which I think are very valuable. I mean, I consider myself to be disciplined in what I do, well, as much as I try to be. Clifton Strengths, if you know what that is, my number one is discipline. And I can't tell you the amount of times where I've had to stay up for something, and I had waken up with this immense guilt, like overwhelming guilt, for not reaching a standard of living that I hold myself to. And what's so funny, interesting actually, is I woke up this morning, afternoon. It was like 11, almost 12. Yeah. And I woke up, and the first thing that I told myself was like, I'm so grateful that I get to do this today, because I get to have a conversation with you. For the longest time, I've wanted to build something like a platform where people can have these conversations. And today is the day where I get to do that. And I am so grateful for it. And I'm going to wake up and I'm going to move towards this spirit of gratitude and let that be the driving force for the day. And so I think that is something that I've had to learn a lot, and I'm still getting better at, right? And I think I replaced that with this sense of urgency almost that I would have if I ever got up late. Of course, urgency is normal. We're the first week of the semester, so things aren't as chaotic. But I had woken myself up being intentional about this gratitude, because I knew that gratitude was going to carry me into a spirit of like not just productivity, but also of enjoyment, of love. And I think that's the goal. And I think your word forgiveness is such a beautiful exemplification of that. So I celebrate that, man. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Man, it's been an amazing conversation. I think it's a great time to just wrap things up. I got one more question for you. Yeah. Right? One thing I want to just ask all my guests before we just end our conversation, it has to do with this idea of courage. because I think when we talk about moving fast, or no, starting things, right? I think that takes a lot of courage to bring an idea out of you that is going to put you into a place where you're out of your comfort zone, where you're going to be taking on a risk. And my question for you would be, what's the most courageous decision you think you've done in your life as of today?
Okay. Wow, that's a great question. So I could give you a boring answer, and I could also give you the more interesting one. Which one do you want to hear?
I mean, come on, we gotta go to the interesting one.
Okay.
Or if you want boring later, but let's hear the interesting one.
Okay. It was when I confessed my feelings to my girlfriend.
Oh!
Yeah.
Oh wow. That was wow, that's
the
so...
boring one was starting the company, but like it's not interesting.
If she's watching this, I know she's gonna love me.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was definitely a bigger risk for me because I had Jesse and Ishan, like they already had the idea in their mind about starting Collegiate. I helped them out over the summer, and I asked them up front, like over winter break, if I could join as a co-founder. But yeah, like I always had those three as like a teammate, as like teammates I could rely on, right? But like what I was asking Divya out is probably at least for me internally, right?
Yeah.
It was the scariest moment for me, but I was also super excited because this is the first time I've ever like directly confessed my feelings to someone that I was very confident I liked. And I was also really good friends with her. So there's also this fear in my mind that what happens if she was just very nice to me this whole time and then I confess and now I lose out on the friendship as well.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad things worked out, but I think also just getting involved with the startup also changed my mindset towards how I approach other things in my life, because it's like, okay, if I can start a new idea, and I just had a new idea as I was talking about this. I also see like running a company is kind of like some act of self-expression too, where it's just like, this is something you've internally cared about, and now you want to put yourself out there. You really want to put this idea to the test, because that's essentially what it is. You're putting your idea, your thoughts, your emotions into a product or a service. You deliver it to other people, and they're either going to say, we like this, or this is garbage, right? And that's also how I was like, okay, if I had the courage to do this, I might as well just be upfront. This is how I feel. And I just left things from there. And then I also got ghosted for 10 minutes, right? And I thought that was a bad thing.
Oh.
But it turns out that she just got so excited, she didn't know how to respond. So
That's so cute. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The cutest couple. Oh my goodness. Cutest couple in Chasing Lightning. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Well, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I'm sure you weren't.
No. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's beautiful. I love how we're ending this on that note, on the topic of human relationships.
Yeah.
And how courage infuses into it. You guys are a lovely couple. I'm so glad that you made that decision.
Thank you.
I would say it turned out pretty well, right?
Yeah.
On both ends. On both in the business and the relationship. That's amazing. But Mridul, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, to share what you're doing at Collegiate. I mean, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate our friendship, and I appreciate just getting to be around you. I mean, you're one of the people that really helped me chase lightning and to embody the principles of living slow, moving fast, starting things and doing it sustainably. So yeah, man, thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you so much for giving me this platform to express myself. I'm honored to be your first guest here.
Bro.
But I had a fantastic time. And from the first time I got to know you, I just felt like you would be a natural podcaster. Like, I feel like this is really your calling. So I'm glad you're taking this opportunity up.
Yeah, of course, dude. Thank you so much. I can't wait for the next time you come on the podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Awesome.
So that's it for today's episode. If you found something that was insightful or helpful, then share it with someone who's like you today, because they'll probably find it insightful or helpful as well. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then feel free to leave a like and subscribe. And if you're listening to this on a streaming platform, then don't forget to leave a rating. These things really help grow the channel and to get the message to whoever needs it the most. And I cannot be more thankful for you guys. Keep living slow, moving fast, and starting things. And I will see you in the next episode. Peace.